Hello, SGD here, and I'll be starting a series, The Science of Symbols, I'll be calling it. This will be part one, and it will be a much longer extension of, about 2 years ago I did a earlier version of this, but given recent uploads and some other aspects, so I'll be extending it out because it's quite a bit of info. And the focus, especially on the first parts, will be on Athanasius Kircher, who's very important, prolific historian, a polymath, really, and 1602 to 1680, which puts it at this very important point. I'll put some links in the description. I'll try to remember also to put the Hermeticist series because will relate to all of these, but we'll be looking and focusing on this particular one of his drawings and the astronomical, geometric, metrological, arithmetic, and also extend that to musical connections because he did some really interesting stuff which will also connect to the Ionic and Doric systems of measurement, and also because they're also musical modes. But firstly, he was a Jesuit, and that's interesting. Just earlier, yesterday I put one up in regards to Gnosticism, and Ignatius Loyola, and anyway, but how this will connect not just to how so much of this is drawn from the Bible, but also how it connects to this is the most famous Freemasons, but these symbols which not exclusive to them, and that's much broader, much wider, and these symbols are of the craft as it is in Masonry, but the essentially the ancient sciences, and how they also connect to the ancient world, to places like the Parthenon and the Great Pyramids as some examples. Now, this is another one of his famous drawings. We have the 72 points around there, which the tetragrammaton and, well, the names of God, so 72, but then 216 also develops from that. We'll go into these later. Illustrations such as this one, which contains quite a bit. Firstly, well, the ratio, and we see the eye, but the owl or Bubo is Athena, but which is a symbol of wisdom. We see the moon goddess Artemis or Diana as well, with the both the eagle but also the peacock as Parvo, and also we see the sun god. Could call him Apollo as well, but we all seeing eye. These simple, especially the caduceus Kundalini, which is a Hermetic symbol, as in Hermes, a measuring rod, and well, she's carrying the same thing. And so for instance, also very much into astronomy, so especially the Quadrivium. And you also see the celestial, the globe of stars, or the constellations, not just the zodiac, but the constellations. You also see the celestial globe, or the Earth, and then, well, the Moon and the Sun. So there we see Sun, Earth, Moon, and stars. So we have this standard feature. For instance, this is another very interesting one because it connects quite a bit. And for instance, what do we have here? We have the dove, or the pigeon, Columba, 13 leaves in the olive branch, Cornucopia, and the Acanthus leaf. And these are all, so again, the constellation Columba, which is very strongly linked to the flood legends such as Noah, but more importantly, the much older legend of Utnapishtim, as told in the Babylonian Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh. I'll put a link in the description to the Columbian symbolism, which is not just ancient, but is embedded in so many other aspects, from tracing boards, but architecture, street plans, so many. Of course, the dove is a standard symbol in churches, for instance. Also, what do we have? Well, again, the Acanthus leaf, and this very, very important symbol. This is a huge story on its own. It's basically it's untold, and yet it's in plain sight. And also the Cornucopia. I'll put some links in the description. Recent series I did on these as well, and how it's connected, especially to Masons, Odd Fellows, but also again ancient traditions, and really just sort of everywhere. Yeah, so the Horn of Plenty, as it's called, this again, links in the description. Another one of his drawings, and what do we have again? The same sort of thing. So Apollo, the sun god, Hermes wearing the traveler's hat and holding the caduceus, the winged caduceus as well. We have Artemis, more like the depiction from the Temple of Artemis, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, or Diana, the moon goddess. And we also have a link to the three Cyclops, which worked with Hephaestus, typo there, or Vulcan, the god of metalworking, essentially. But with a focus on this one, and I did this a while ago, but there will be more to this particular, and looking a bit more deeper at it and drawing a lot more connections from this. And so, and for instance, connecting it to Freemasonic carpets and aprons and tracing boards, such as these here. So we begin with this one. Again, so how it crosses, and there's a lot of information, and it's scientific information in the essence of it. Now, there's a tendency to separate the esoteric from the exoteric, but if you look at people such as Kircher, Gunther, all these very important hermeticists of this period, they're all writing in the same language, whether it's in the Quadrivium, it's in what would be separated. So I would say that, you know, to separate the exoteric from the esoteric is a mistake, because, well, they're linking these, and it's sort of like, oh, this is just plain, you know, math and science, and the esoteric is all ritual and all this other spiritual stuff. Well, no, they're very strongly connected, and that's why the masters of this always wrote in the same language, in the same symbols. And it's really important, because so for instance, you typically see in a Hollywood movie, they draw the pentagram to do whatever they're doing. Well, how do you draw a pentagram? You need to draw it properly, and you can't draw a pentagram unless you know geometry. And all the symbols that are connected with it are astronomical symbols. You need to understand these. So to go into that area and not have an understanding of the Quadrivium, and to separate these two, is you know, it's like trying to make, well, you just can't do it. It can't be done, because this is the language that they wrote in. And then they also wrote in, let's just say, the more mystic aspects of this as well. But this is the foundation stone of it. And, well, for instance, the Pythagorean schools and earlier Egyptian, the mystery schools, and what's connected in those. So we'll begin like this. What's this relatively modern painting of Pythagoras, but still the guys in the know are writing in symbols. And so for all the compass and square, that's just a giveaway. We see the globe there, the lyre and the music, and also this tree. But how does this connect to this? And first we see, what's this guy doing? Well, he's holding the compass, and he's got 3, 4, 5. That's Pythagorean. That's Pythagorean knowledge, and it's one of the most important things we learn at school, because we see this same 3, 4, 5. Now, 1, 2, edge length, 1, 2, 3, the edge length of that square, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the edge length of this square, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a 3, 4, 5 triangle, but it's also one of the most elegant and simple proofs of Pythagorean theorem. So there's, again, a lot of lovely math in there, in here as well, plus the checkerboard, but this connects directly to that. And, well, there we see close, 3, 4, 5 triangle, understanding Pythagorean theorem. You can't do the craft, you can't do construction, you can't do geometry. This is like, you know, this is a debate, one of the most basic, but also most profound, most important of them. And that's why it's so important. The Pythagorean theorem, but also the Pythagorean schools, and the Masons of old, and including people like Kircher, who was not an active Mason in that he was a practicing stonemason, but he did pass on these. This is what's just essential. So Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and 3, 4, 5. This is the first Pythagorean triplet, it's called, because 3 squared 9 plus 4 squared 16 equals 25. So this is the first of the Pythagorean triplets that works for all triangles, but this is where you have the whole numbers. This is why the 3, 4, 5, and then the 5, 12, 13 is the second Pythagorean triplet, and these are why it's so important and reoccurs well, across the world, across ancient sites, for instance, Stonehenge and many other places, including, well, what's he holding? A pyramid, and what it's in the pyramids as well. And it's a lovely series of connections. So we have the Great Pyramid there in the background, and Khaphre's pyramid here towards the front. Now, Khaphre's pyramid is in proportion. It's a 3, 4, 5 triangle there. So that's the first reference to it. Now, if we go into the upper chamber, or the king's chamber, it itself, did a recent video have a vesica and so much other stuff, but the 3, 4, 5 triangle is embedded in here as well. And this is often described as an accent, but we do know it's even in old papyrus that the Egyptian ropes, they use this to measure land. Now, it's argued that they didn't have an understanding of Pythagorean theorem. It's not clearly written down, no, but the Sumerians, Babylonians at the time did understand it, and they were contemporary with the Egyptians here. So it's more than reasonable to say that yes, they did have an understanding of it, because their very close neighbours had an understanding of it, and some much more recent, well, yeah, in their geometry is written in their clay tablets. They've even got some really nice trigonometry as well. So the 3, 4, 5 triangle in the pyramids as well. And so Pythagoras, did he really invent this? No, we know that he didn't. It's still sort of said that he did, but we find that in is it Plimpton 322 or these other clay tablets from Sumer and Babylon. Yes, they knew this, they did. And of course, Pythagorean theorem, again, there's these, you know, especially that 3, 4, 5 triangle is one of the loveliest, simplest proofs of it. We see it's a very important feature in Freemasons as well, but also in the cathedral builders. And again, the compass, the square, and even this particular compass is pointing at the protractor, or the understanding of degrees. But well, there we see it, and it is just it's a constant. But also, for instance, in this tracing board, what do we have? We have the 3, 4, 5 triangle, and again, that they're showing one of these proofs to, you know, and also, well, it's also in this board here. And so, for instance, we see it there, we see it there, and we see it there. Very important. Now, we also have what's here above. He has a triangle. Now, it's often said that a triangle is not a pyramid. They're two separate things. But now let's look at the triangle, and how does that connect to this particular board? Well, we have, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, and what do we have? 1, 2, so 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the Tetractys, these dots, which so important. The Pythagoreans swore an oath on the Tetractys. It was one of the most important sacred symbols, along with the pentagram in the Pythagorean schools and that whole particular area. And it also does point to some very lovely other geometry. So, for instance, if you can see, well, there's the Star of David in there, for instance. That's one aspect of it. And that geometry comes out of the vesica and out of the seed and flower of life. It's embedded in this very important sacred geometry. And so, yeah, when 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals plus 4 equals 10, and there's nice, now in Kabbalist and Jewish mysticism, that's the tetragrammaton, or the name of God, which I mentioned earlier, which also Kircher did with 72, and which gives us 216 as well. So these just lovely numbers just keep appearing over and over. But we'll also see that, so these are two other, so you have two versions of these tracing boards, and, well, the tetragrammaton, we find that there, and we see it here. And of course, across the Hermeticists of that period of Kircher, just before him and directly following, always included these symbols in their artworks as well. And next we have, so if you focus down on this angel, what's he doing now? This is arithmetic, and I'll leave that for the next part. I'm coming up to 15 minutes, but yeah, these boards, lovely knowledge in here. It's very profound concern with geometry, arithmetic, music and astronomy, and especially weights and measures, because this is Hermeticism. Hermes, the god of weights and measure, the god of knowledge, just like Thoth, god essentially of the sciences. And it's okay, end of part 1, and hope you have a good one. Next part coming soon. Hello SGD here. This will be part 2 in the science of symbols. You can find part 1 link in the description, and where we left off, so we were looking at this Athanasius Kircher and the multiple illustrations, but with a focus on this one, how it connects to Pythagorean symbolism as amongst others. So what we saw was this 1, 2, 3, 4 and the tetrad, or the tetractys as it's called, and how this applies to geometry as well as really nice arithmetic, but also this symbol was key. The Pythagoreans swore an oath on this tetractys, and they also had used the pentagram as an identifier. But so focus there, you can just highlight it. It's essentially triangular numbers, which is a very important connected feature. So much to be extracted from this, and it all connects nicely. But so we see that symbol. Now, one of the ways so for instance, recently this was adopted as the flag of the Earth by NASA, and it's a little bit stylized there, but what we have there is the seed of life. It's very simple design, and we also see it amongst many other places, in the Osiron in Egypt as well, carved there on the stone. Now, this geometry is very beautiful, lovely geometry, is what also leads us to this the tetrad, or the tetractys, or the tetragrammaton as it's also called. But for instance, from there we get a Star of David, or we could do a hexagon, but if you keep adding the lines together, we start to get this. And if we draw a triangle, now it's just at a bit of an angle, but what we have is this very special, but also in geometry and arithmetic. And for instance, the hexagon, whether it's the poles of Saturn, or even light bursts. For instance, when you get the camera, you typically get the 6 point. If you take a photo of the sun, or a light point, you'll get this hexagonal, but beehives. It's just the most beautiful, most efficient shape in nature, and this is one of the reasons for it, but also connects to arithmetic, especially triangular numbers and the tetragrammaton, or the tetractys. So for the name of God, as it is in Kabbalist Jewish mysticism, and also some other researchers have pointed out lovely connections in modern, but also ancient architecture in these symbols here as well. So that's one of these added connections. Now, we did touch on that, so just okay, for instance, but also there we see, so the bottom 4, there we see the tetragrammaton, or the tetractys in Pythagorean school. You see how it crosses multiple schools, whether it's from the pre-Christian through to the modern time, and for instance here in Freemason tracing boards. But another feature, so we saw those, and then we come to this angel here, or what would you call him? Not an angel, I forget the name, like a Cupid type of thing. Forget anyway. Well, even numero, so numbers. Okay, and what do we have? We have a magic square. So whatever direction you add these numbers up, you'll always get 15, which in itself will connect to the tetractys in some very lovely ways. And the use of magic squares is amongst especially esoteric artists, architecture. You'll find magic squares so often, especially with some very specific numbers, which will connect back to the other themes that you'll find throughout here. So again, the tetragrammaton and the tetractys, or even and the magic square. Well, what do we have? So we also have this theme of 3, 5, and 7 steps, that's what we're reading across there in this particular magic square. And if we look at, like, this is just, so if you zoom in on this particular Masonic board, okay, we have the stairway 3, 5, and 7. And there are more than a few others, but like for instance, the 5 orders of Roman architecture, which also connect to these 5 senses as well: Tuscan, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, Composite. And these are all very important. Also systems of measure, systems of music, and architectural schools of architecture. So there was 3 columns: Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, in the Greek schools, and then the Romans added two more, so like Etruscan and Tuscan, but they also have a composite column, which is a Corinthian plus an Ionic. Now we also have a Doric, so Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, Doric column, Corinthian column, and an Ionic column. So these are the three schools. But also the seven, well, there's many other references to seven, but the seven liberal arts being one example of these steps that you need to go through to move up the ladder, so to speak. Now, another nice point about 15. So the tetractys, or was 1, 2, 3, 4, which gives us 10. So the fourth triangular number is 10. So the second triangular number is 3, 1 plus 2. 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals 6. That's the third, and that's the fourth. And that's now, if we add the next level, we put 5 dots across, and the next triangular number is 15. Now from there we get some nice links, and so amongst others, but for instance, if you add the first plus the second triangular number, the second, you get 2 squared. Okay, so if you add the second, plus the third, second plus the third, you get 3 squared. Now if you add the third plus the fourth, you get 4 squared. If you add the fourth plus the fifth, you get 5 squared. So you add two neighboring triangular numbers together, you'll get the square of the place of the larger, you'll get the square. Now for instance, 3, 4, 5, I mentioned earlier 3, 4, 5 triangles. Also the 2, 3, 4 can also be found in the, anyway, it's built into the pyramids as well in so many other places. But now, staying on that board, now what do we have? This figure down here, and there we see the zoom. Now he's got his book open, and he's got a 6-pointed star, or the Star of David, and he's got a 5-pointed star. Now Albrecht Dürer, very important person in this field in the late 15th, early 16th century, in this very chunky period in regards to Hermeticism, the rise of Rosicrucians and these type of, one of his constructions, he does this, that's a 6 over, so you have a pentagon. Now that's the vesica there, and so that's essentially it's a hexagon there, and so there we see the hexagon emerging from the vesica down here, and there we see the 5-pointed star, 6 over 5. Now this construction that he has here is not perfect. It's very, very close, and in itself, the imperfection actually includes some lovely knowledge, especially connecting to Sun and Earth and Moon, for instance, through 273, or 109.2 to be exact. That's 22.73 times 4 is, anyway, that's a Sun, Earth and Moon, baby. It's always there. And so the 6 over 5, so that's the construction if you were to do the Albrecht Dürer method. Now I'll put the link in the description, because I'll show you how to do a perfect pentagram with compass and straight edge. That link will be in the description. And the basis of that design is the vesica, which gives us the hexagon as well. So it all nicely joins in. Now this will bring us back to, well, for instance, John Dee, famous for Enochian magic. Now Enoch, and then through Solomon, that's where this Enochian magic comes from, and then it was later resurrected and brought up. So all the stuff with Crowley, he was looking at John Dee and Edward Kelly and what's called Enochian magic. Now, how did they, for instance, this is an important symbol tool used by John Dee, and we see the pentagram in the middle. So that's why it's important to be able to draw these things if you're into that stuff. But we also see the 7-pointed star around the outside. So how do you draw these? It's to do, if you want to go down this road, I personally, that's not my thing, but you need to understand the geometry, and that's why the separation of the exoteric and esoteric, I think, is a big mistake, because, well, these famous figures were geometricians. They were metrologists, as well as being into astrology, Enochian magic, and this type of thing. So to do this, you need to understand the geometry of it. Now, this is Albrecht Dürer's his method of doing it. Now he's only got one triangle there, but that's the 6-pointed star there. So if you just to join the dots, you get the vesica again. But from that emerges this technique. Link will be in the description how to draw a very close approximate of the 7-pointed star using compass and straight edge. And where else is, so okay, we see the triangle there, where we see the triangle in the middle, and around it, what do we have? Oh, that's the nonagon there, sorry. And okay, well, I've got a nonagon video in there. I'll put that link in the description if I remember. But in regards to the heptagon, or the 7-pointed star, heptagram, I'll link in the description. Geek 37 shows how to do an exact construction of a regular heptagon 7-pointed star. This is a close approximate, but he'll show you using, you can also draw it perfectly, but this is using a CAD system, and that's very, very, very clever. A great channel. He does a lot of geometry and math stuff, and highly recommend subscribing to his channel. So this 6/5, this important geometry, and it connects. Nonagon, the 9-pointed star, very important as well. He also has got some excellent videos. That's Geek 37. He also shows how to do the nonagon. And I'll also put a link. I've got a compass and straight edge version from the Flower of Life to do, again, a close approximate, but it's not perfect. Geek 37 can show you how to do it perfectly. Now, in regards to that 6/5, so we see these, so Templars or Temperance, which is like the Odd Fellows and these other organizations full of Masonic symbols. It's not just the Masons. But what do we have? The 6 and the 5-pointed star. 6 and 5, and we also have the use of 6 and 5-pointed stars here. Important geometry in regards to many aspects and understanding these boards. So as a review, okay, what we have is the, well, for instance, the pentagram is connected to the golden ratio. It's the best, it's a beautiful way in geometry terms doing the golden ratio. We saw the 3, 4, 5 triangle, Pythagorean triangle, Euclid's 47th. This is also, I think, the third step of Masons. You must contemplate Euclid's theorem, I think. That's in, at least in, anyway, but that's an important feature because of the compass and square, and we're using this geometry and then Pythagorean theorem, we can start to work out things such as the square root of 2, the square root of 3, and square root of 5. Square root of 4 is easy, that's 2, but square root of 5. So once you understand Pythagorean theorem and this geometry, you can then start to do some really nice math, which is so important in construction and well, masonry, engineering, maths, science. It's a must know, but it's also embedded in these older forms. Key stuff to understand. Okay, so now we saw the magic square on this angel, numero. Now I can't read that now. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but what's this angel doing? Well, there's a few connections there, and I'll carry on in the next episode, but just as an intro, what's he doing? Well, he's holding a pendulum, or a plumb bob more specifically, and there's a plumb line there, and there we see for Temple of Solomon, this very important figure again in Freemasons, the legend of Hiram Abiff, the Temple of Solomon, and the construction and the secrets of understanding how to build and how to understand the geometry of these things. And also, this is a system of measure. You can also apply this to a pendulum and create a very accurate timepiece as well. And for instance, on this, what do we have? We have the plumb line and the square. So that's how, just like a level. How do you keep things level? Well, this is one tool, and there we see again this other tool in there as well. And in the series I did on recent on cornerstones, the links will be in the description. But the importance of it there. So that will be, I'll do more of this on the next episode. But with that, I hope you enjoyed. There's a lot of information to be read from this, and it's done in a very elegant way, very profound way, and it has many applications and very practical, let's call it, but, construction, engineering, masonry, maths, science. It's all built around these tools. Before the computer age, we had to do things differently, and we did it with very simple tools and some very cool logic. And with that, hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello SGD, this will be part 3 in this series, the science of symbols, and especially be looking, Athanasius Kircher, very famous Jesuit, but also Hermeticist, esoterician, in his very interesting part of history, just as really the blossoming of science and the Enlightenment, Renaissance, that whole sort of period around the Renaissance and towards the Enlightenment, and how strongly these symbols and illustrations are connected to essentially what would be referred to as science. But it was at a time when symbolism was more important. So, for instance, now we have, books are cheap. So, but especially back then, you had to be efficient with the way you transmitted information, and also because people were much more literate in symbolism as opposed to plain text and graphs like we have now. Things were done differently. And so this is the one that we've been focusing on. And so already we've looked at say we have the Quadrivium, which are the 4 higher of the 7 liberal arts: arithmetic, geometry, which we've done these two, and now we'll have a quick look at music, and as we get to astronomy, and how these 4 disciplines blend into one another in a very beautiful way, especially around these very lovely numbers that just keep popping up across time, across cultures, across the world. So earlier we had a look, for instance, the 6/5 diagram, the Pythagorean theorem, and how this applies to so many other aspects, and also the magic square. And these will be recurrent because this geometry and arithmetic will come back. And so just as we're going through it quick, you really need to watch the first 2 episodes because I'll be moving much quicker this time. So just to review, so for instance, the 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the tetractys or the tetragrammaton, and how that's embedded there. Now there we see that, how the geometry, the arithmetic, which is lovely, but also, for instance, the Pythagorean schools or cults, mystery schools of that time, which emerged, or surely appeared much earlier than that. But this tetractys, this triangle with these dots, just 1, 2, 3, 4, and now Pythagorean Hammer's music theory that we have still with us now. Again, it's credited to Pythagoras, but there's more to it. So he was walking past a blacksmith shop, and they were, a team of men were working the hammers, and he noticed there was a certain ratio between these hammers that made them very harmonic. And it turned out that one hammer was 6 pounds, one was 8, one was 9, and one was 12, which gives us these lovely music ratios which join us back to the tetractys of music theory. So for instance, the perfect fifth, 2/3, the perfect fourth, 3/4. This is again and going back again, even medieval period, musica. So Pythagorean hammers and music theory, which also will connect to the harmonic numbers. But so again, we saw just a review of the tetractys and how both Kircher, and it appears so many other places, and Pythagorean hammers. Now, how does the Pythagorean theorem, this 3, 4, 5 triangles, connect to that? Well, in a very, very interesting set of ways. So Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared is c squared. The first Pythagorean triplet is the 3, 4, 5 triangle. And from a triangle, we now move to pyramids, or as I showed in an earlier part, so the Great Pyramids. So the Pyramid of Khafre is at a 2:3 ratio, but also it gives us this 3, 4, 5 triangle, and this is built into the Vesica Piscis. Beautiful stuff. It's just, it's extraordinarily simple but lovely. And we can also find that one example, for instance, is in the Great Pyramid, or the Khufus, or Cheops as it's called as well. And we see the 3, 4, 5 in there. And that's not just one thing by accident. That whole chamber is full of info. I've done some recent videos and older ones. It's just, including some of my own findings, just full of bloody information. And extraordinary metrology, ratios, everything. And also, it's known that the Egyptian rope stretchers had the 3-4-5 triangle, which, again, it's mentioned that before, that they won't give them credit that they understood it. That's something else. Now, how else do these connect? And so, especially through what's called Masonic knowledge. Now, I've just changed put the I of in there. But so back to the vesica. It's just two circles, equal size. The center of the second circle on the edge of the first, and that gives us a 2-to-3 ratio. 2 radius high, 3 radius wide, and that of course defines the pyramid of Khafre. But it also is a ratio which connects the Great Pyramid with the Red Pyramid. The Red Pyramid base is 420, the Great Pyramid height is 280, a 3-to-2 ratio. 3-to-2, the perfect fifth is it's also called the Hermetic constant. You'll find it in many modern buildings as well. For instance, Frank Albo's work in regards to Manitoba and Ain Dara, which was recently this ancient site which was bombed. You'll also we'll see the 4-to-3 ratio can be found in many sites in ancient France at Karnak. So is it the Crisuno circles? It really can be found everywhere across the ancient world as well. And again, it's just we won't give them credit for this knowledge. Or on the other side, lost knowledge was never lost, as we shall see. It's just being carried through the mystery schools, through the whatever you want, the different embodiments of it, but it's being carried through. So the pyramids are very musical. This 2-to-3 ratio just keeps reflecting, especially through Pythagorean hammers. Where did Pythagoras and these Greek scholars learn this? Well, we know that they had contact with India, and we know they went down to Egypt. So they didn't just pop up out of the earth. It's part of a much older tradition. Now, the Parthenon is another extraordinary ancient site, full of knowledge and just extraordinary. And again, we won't credit this to that because that upsets, some. Otherwise, we go to one extreme, aliens, literally, and down to the other. No, they just sort of clumsily did it by accident. But let's look at the ratio within the Parthenon. The length to width, height to width is 9-to-4, that's 3 squared plus 4 squared, or to 4 squared, which is like a 3-to-4 television, and even the 16:9, which is all these even your monitor is continuing this ancient tradition, and we see that the Parthenon, these musical proportions, 9-to-4, which is 3 squared to 2 squared. 3-to-2, 3-to-2. Also, we'll find 4-to-3. You'll find that the measurements, the number, just continue throughout the temple. This is not the only reference in the Parthenon, and it's not the only reference in the ancient Egyptian temple, especially the very curious pyramids, which is just one of these enigmas that stay with us. Now, also showed this the 3-5-7, the magic square of 15, and I have a focus on this one because I received an interesting comment in regards to this, something I hadn't picked up myself, where we have the 5 orders of Roman orders of architecture. We have the Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, but the Romans added 2 more, the Tuscan and the Composite, so there are 3 Greek but 5 in total added by the Romans. Now, it was Space Creator Band. Notice Masonic art encoding music at minute 432, which is a nice coincidence. The 5 orders of architecture. Check the pillars in the drawing. 3 light ones and 2 dark ones. Equals the perfect fifth, is 3-to-2 ratio, which is, again, I did an ancient legacy. I did a series on that. Just how many other places across the world it just pops up. It's essential in temple building, still in modern times as well. But also the minor third, the 6/5. So again, this 3-to-2, and Ionic and Doric, or Ionian and Dorian, are also musical modes, which Kircher did, and I'll go to those. I'll come back to those in future episodes because these guys know what they're doing, and they just wrote it in a different way. And if it's not written with a official ISBN number and if it's not passed through the official channels, it's just not considered acceptable. And let's say, anyway, so the 3-4-5 well, that will also connect to this music theorem, because the vesica is a 3:2 ratio, and the 3:4:5 when we cut it down. But that also gives us a 3:4 ratio in that rectangle. So 2:3 and 3:4, which it keeps going and going. Now this 5:6 and the hexagon and the pentagram connecting to the golden ratio, perfect geometric expression of it. This is perfect number in nature. There's nothing like it. Now this will lead us also to the tetragrammaton, well, the name of God. And so, well, where did this Vulcan sign come from? It's also linked to Shin, the it stands for fire. It's also called the lion's paw or the eagle's paw, and it is important in part of Freemasonry and especially connected to alchemy, fire being one of these aspects of it. So this is he is not copying this as Hoagland. Sorry, I forget. Oh, sorry, pardon me, I forget his name. He does some excellent presentations, but Vulcans didn't. They're not copying Star Trek. Star Trek is copying them. And this has to do, so that's how it's expressed, and also the number of the number of knuckles that you have all connects back to these harmonic numbers, but that's what's also referred to as the name of God. Now, Shin, or fire, is the 21st letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The 21st letter of the Greek alphabet is the symbol we use for fire, and 21 is the 6th triangular number, and we also see it in the Fibonacci spiral, which is this way of drawing phi, or coming very close to it. It's not like the pentagram where you have perfect phi, but without going into depth, phi doesn't have to be perfect. It's a wave, and the further you get, well, okay, it's something else, but, well, so the 72 parts and 216 letters. There was a few comments in recent videos as well. These are just the bee's knees of lovely numbers. Now, which brings us back to the magic square that they were using, and 15, and okay, that was just a quick reminder. Well, 15 is the 5th triangular number, and then we have 21, so which is a nice reference there as well. And, well, back to Kircher and 72. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 70, 71, 72. There's 72 names of God, as it's called, which again connects back to the tetragrammaton. And he mentions Space Creator, the minor third, the 6/5 ratio. So this here, now that's written in numbers. If we just draw it as, we just extend that and just do it as a geometry. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5 and the 6. So we get the 6:5 ratio, which is also a lovely one in music. Now, Rene Descartes, famous for, I think, therefore I am quote, but he is the one who, at least in written form, gave us the Cartesian coordinates, 3-dimensional coordinates, and in his work, Compendium Musica, Compendium of Music, well, we see all these ratios, 6/5/6, 4/5, and 3/4, and 2/3. So all these lovely numbers as well. And now if you'd extend it down a little bit, keep going with it, you get the 9/8 whole tone ratio as well. So it just keeps going. Now I showed this painting of Pythagoras. It's not, of course, it's not from his time, but these guys, again, they pass on the information. Well, they include the music reference, because the music, geometry, and arithmetic of Pythagoras connects also to astronomy and also to alchemy, and, well, all these. Now, alchemy is a dirty word, but up to a certain point, alchemy was chemistry, and then the Royal Society come along, and then it became known as chemistry. And so to separate alchemy from chemistry, it's just an arbitrary line in the sand. And before the Royal Society, they were alchemists. They were metallurgists, they were making glass, they were making medicines, they were doing all sorts of chemistry. And so, well, the 6/5, now how does that also connect? I mentioned the Pythagorean theorem. Once you got that, you can work out the square root of 2. And in equal temperament music, the square root of 2 is essential in there. So, what this is just the tip of the iceberg in regards to this, because there's so much more just in this illustration, not to include the other ones. But this is not just some fluffy sort of nonsense, religious, superstitious stuff, if you want to think of it in that way. It's not evil stuff either. It's profound knowledge just written in a different form. We'll go further and further, and with that, have a good one. Hello, SGD here, and this will be part 4 of the series Science of the Symbols. And now we'll still focusing on Athanasius Kircher, this very important figure, Jesuit, but let's just call him a early scientist, and very clearly a hermeticist, and very clearly an esoterician. And so mainly we've been focusing on this drawing, and I did in earlier episode mention one of these drawings as well, and so we'll be looking at these two and how they connect to, especially in the modern times, Freemasonic tracing boards, carpets and aprons, and the symbols, emblems, and the meanings of them, and the information, the very important knowledge that they contain. And just as an example, so I mentioned earlier, okay, I won't do that for now. Let's stick with the program. Okay, so these two drawings. Now, if you want to pause for a moment, and what do they have in connection? Well, I'll give you a second. And, well, I mentioned earlier the magic square and 15, and I forgot the word, the cherub, the angel there. Now we look at this one, and this is a very important one, and beautiful information, again, just in these parts. Each piece of this drawing is not just random for aesthetic value. There's information, knowledge in each little piece of these drawings. And we'll look at this cherub. What's he holding? A plumb line. You see that this is a very important feature in Freemasonic, Oddfellows, and these type of organizations, and it's still, well, especially to the story of Hiram Abiff and King Solomon and the temple. And it's, again, it will be meant, it's in Bible as well, but the plumb line. So on this board we see two plumb lines, or the levels as well. So this is a level to measure the horizontal, and this is a level to measure the vertical. And so these drawings, now again focusing on this cherub here and the plumb line. Now, where is the plumb line in this illustration? Well, it's lots of them. But that's first got to do, and Edmund Gunther, as you can see, was the same period, and he served under Queen Elizabeth I, and the mile and the foot and so many imperial measures that we have now as our official standards were actually brought into law by Elizabeth I with the work of Edmund Gunther. He was an astronomer, mathematician, geometer, and clergyman as well. So just like Kircher, he was he's got his fingers in many pots. As they say, a Renaissance man. He was, you weren't a specialist you understood many aspects of Quadrivium and the 7 liberal arts. One of the things he's most famous for publishing, not inventing, but for publishing on and publish on in detail, is the quadrant. Now this is it's essentially a sextant. It's a measuring tool. It's used for navigation, but also for, well, measuring the height, and you can also apply it to measuring the distance of things once you get, the Pythagorean theorem, a bit of trigonometry. But this is his quadrant. And what do we have? It's basically a protractor or a compass with a plumb line on it. Links will be in a description. I did a series, History of the Hermetic, but part 1 and part 2. Those links will be in a description, because talk about, well, especially the difference between the older Bibles and the King James Bible, and how important Edmund Gunther, Queen Elizabeth, John Dee, Francis Bacon, and, well, King James I were, and what information, beautiful information they were encoding in there. So the surveyor's chain, or the Gunther's chain, was just one of the published works that were so important in regards to Edmund Gunter. But back to the plumb line, and well, there you can see it's like a quadrant, just a plumb line with a protractor. We have a quadrant. Now, what do we have around this circle, the central one? Well, 10, 20, 30, 40, it's a compass or a protractor. It's dividing it up into degrees. And he's also encoding some lovely trig there by a 20-degree angle here, and it cuts across. But this one where the Columba, the dove, well, that begins with 30, and that's a very important feature as well. Now, also notice there we have the zodiac. We have another zodiac there. Zodiac. And down here we have the heptagon 7-pointed stars and the 7 planets or heavenly bodies: Sun, Earth, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn, which are also alchemical symbols. And this is an important because there's alchemy in here as well, or chemistry. Now, alchemy's got a dirty name, but back then, before the Royal Society, alchemy was chemistry, and they knew, they were all metallurgists, glass makers, medicines, all these types of things. So, if you hear, don't cringe when you hear alchemy. It's just chemistry before the Royal Society made an artificial line in history, because the early chemists believed in phlogiston theory and all these other things, which we now sort of, in pseudoscience, as they call it. But alchemy is not a pseudoscience. For instance, I posted a while back something on alchemy and showed how the basic, still in chemistry, things like distillation and the basic operations in chemistry were actually encoded in these older alchemical works. And then someone laughed, haha, but alchemists believe you could turn lead to gold, and I'm Mr. Science. And then, well, it shut him up really quickly, because I just posted a few links to how he said it was impossible to turn base metals into gold. Well, it's not. It's been known for years and years that you can do this. It's really, really expensive. It's not profitable, but you can do it. So the alchemist delusion that you can turn lead to gold being a falsehood, well, no, it's, you've got to keep up with this stuff if you want to poo-poo Hermeticism, because you just make an ass of yourself when you just go along with the narrative. But anyway, the quadrant, the plumb line. So what do we have? We have a plumb line, and that it's serpentine, that it's curved like this. This is important as well, because we have another a quadrant. We see 1, 2, 3, 4 quadrants, and each of them have a plumb line in this serpentine form. Serpentine, serpentine. Now, do I just might quick mention of some of you? Okay, so what you'll find is these serpentine rivers. Now, the George Washington National Masonic Memorial has a special wall called the Serpentine Wall. This is an important feature, but okay, getting ahead because we'll get to these things later. But lots of plumb lines, lots of quadrants, measuring tools. It's Hermeticism. Hermes, the god of weights and measures. Thoth, the god of weights and measures and knowledge, just like Hermes as well. Hermes was also the god of commerce and travelers. What do especially commercial travelers need to do? They need to navigate. This Edmund Gunter, Francis Bacon, and Drake, they were sailors, they were navigators, they were map makers. These instruments of Gunter were essential in the modern world, and we still use them today. But the sextant is now a little bit, well, now we've got GPS and we've forgotten how to do these things. But here's some of the other works that Gunter was famous for publishing and in detail. They were of course known, but it was more trade secrets. But around about that time of Gunter, Queen Elizabeth I, they started publishing maps, they started publishing books, instructional books, because they wanted to build a large navy. So instead of a few people keeping the trade secrets of navigation, it went public. And it was just, because they needed to train a lot of officers to, and so the old secrets, all these Hermetic ancient secrets, but at the time of Gunter and Elizabeth I, the King James Bible, it became more public, more accessible knowledge. And that's why a lot of modern secularist sort of types can't understand it, because they think, it hasn't been officially published in a nice ISBN number with but just get that out of your head. Well, apart from the astrolabe, and this is a quadrant, What do we have? The cross staff. A very important measuring item as well. Now, for instance, the cross staff by Gunther, he used exactly 1 yard. His cross staff had to be. That is 108 grains. 108. Well, we also have a cross staff here. Another measuring tool. It's the secrets are there to be had with its geometry, which geometry, geo, earth, measure, metry, earth measure. The Quadrivium, music, astronomy, arithmetic, and geometry are all joined by the Hermetic principles of weights and measure. Thoth, the god of knowledge, engineering, weights and measure. Yeah. Okay, so now we look at this quite well. We've got the I'll go into these other symbols, but I did a whole series on the Cornucopia as well and the thing. But what I want to look at here is part of my Latin. I wasn't, I was trained in a public school, not a proper school. Quadrans, horanum, ab auto et ocasu su inal, I think. Now, but if we drop that into the Google Translator, a quarter hour from east or west, or horizontal. Now, this last word, well, I'm pretty sure that's what it is, but I can't. But these, a quarter hour from east and west, very important because this connects to the plumb line, but also measure systems. I did a series of, link in the description. I did a series on cornerstones, and that they're important. So you have, like, again, your standard mason board, the ashlar, or the tested stone, a precious stone, a sure foundation, a tested stone. We also have the stone the builders rejected, which is got to do with capstones or headstones, and also applications to alchemy and the philosopher's stone. Now, the philosopher's stone, again, is not this Harry Potter stuff, because you look at the work of Newton and these other people, and they talk about it, and we'll get into that later. I've did some videos a while back on that. But the cornerstone, precious stone, again, the plumb line to measure and test the stone. And now we bring in the plumb line, or the plummet, which is this important feature. The plummet, and like we still say now, to plummet is to fall, but that's what a plumb line does. It falls straight down. It's also mentioned in Amos, the importance of the plumb line to, a sure measure. In Solomon's temple, there we see the plumb line still in use today. It's a beautiful, essential tool. Now we want to go now for laser measures and stuff, but with some simple tools you can do amazing work, which relates back to the Merkit, which was a Egyptian plumb line, and plums was so important in Egypt, and it's all over the place. The Merkit was also an Egyptian plumb line, which was used as also a timekeeping device, especially measuring time at night. Also in the Book of the Dead, spell 25, the plumb line. Also, I have not reduced a measuring cord. Honesty in weights and measures, because these science-based measuring principles have strong application to the trivium or aspects of law and honesty. And if you're honest in your measures, you live a good life. And this is why, they measured in the Book of the Dead, your heart was measured against the feather to see if you were an honest person. So this pure science also has moral, spiritual, esoteric value in it as well. There are many, many layers to this, but the fundamental foundation of it is this more tangible scientific, as we call it now, but measure, and the truth shall set you free. UN Security Council, so outside the Security Council building, again, we have a plumb line. It's just a standard universal symbol going back ages. And again, we mentioned this, the Merkit and a plumb line to measure, to test, but also as a timekeeping device. And that's because a pendulum or a plumb line, now in a grandfather clock, it's rigid, but you can use this same principle with a string to make a measuring device. The plumb line is also a tool to measure time. And what else is that cherub holding? Well, he's holding a ruler. If you have the right measure and you have a pendulum, you can measure time. which brings us back to a quarter hour east from west. Now, if you've seen my videos, especially in regards to the meter, the Royal Egyptian cubit, and the second, and all the Great Pyramid embodying the Earth, geometry, Earth measure, it's all there. And that will be featured more in the next episodes. But with that, hope you enjoyed. A lot more to come.